I'm just going to turn it over to Joe Fattorini, who's patching in from Stockholm here, and he is the trade director for Pix. And so the goal of this meeting, Pix is not a client of ours, but all of you probably also know of Paul Mabry's background and his success in developing some e-commerce platforms and tech platforms. And so the latest venture that he's working on is Pix, with a great group of tech and editorial and trade professionals behind it. So we thought it would be a good idea just to literally just open it up and have Pix give us a presentation. And Joe, thanks for joining us. Take it away. I know you've got a deck. You can share that whenever you want, or do an introduction. I'll just turn it over to you and you can go ahead and go for it.
I will do that. Well, it's lovely to see you, and nice to Terry. I can see you there, and Jeff. Lovely to get to meet you. My name's Joe. As you can tell, I'm not Swedish. I'm very much British. I am the trade director. I think we call me the managing director for trade at Pix. I'll explain why we would have a sort of role in that particular space in just a moment. But I'm sort of better known, particularly in the United States, for being something slightly different. I'm also the host of a TV show called The Wine Show, which I think is on Hulu at the moment, along with two daft British actors. And we float around. And so I think we're about to launch our third season in the United States. So that's what I've been doing sort of on the side for a little bit. So every so often people go, I think I've seen you before somewhere. And it's usually because I've been on that TV show. I'm going to share a screen. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about what Pix is, what it does, why it's different. The really useful thing for me is when I show you all these bits, do pop some questions in the chat, because we're still building this. We're quite a long way on, but we are still building this. And it's really important that we build it around what you as trade people need, but equally what our users need. Users are almost easier because we can test that. We can test that later on. For what we can do for you and to create something that's distinctive, we do actually need a certain amount of feedback. And every day people say, kind of nice if it did this, or I like that feature. We tweak things. And in fact, there's one of them I'm working on today. So the idea is, like hopefully most good ideas, is very simple. It is to create a place where wine lovers can find the perfect bottle of wine. I'll tell you where we've got to, and we'll see where we're going to go and how I'd hope you might become involved. I'll just tell you a little bit, these are some of the bits and pieces that we're going to sort of run through, what it does, how we hope it can sort of help you, where we're sort of going with it. So I'll just run through a couple of bits. We call it a wine discovery platform. I'm going to give you various analogies because it's not the same as anything that's there right now, but it's kind of like some other bits and pieces. As trade users, I can see we've got one extra, let Danilo in. As trade users, its core goal is to help people sell more wine to a broader range of people with whom you can have long-term relationships, and to do that more profitably. So it's not a race to the bottom. On the right-hand side, just to give you a sense, we are going to create functionality across the three core wine sales platforms. So starting online on desktop application, or a web search, moving into a mobile application, which we'll hopefully have a bit later on this year. We inverted that process because of COVID. We felt that was something that could come a bit later, and then eventually going out into hotels and restaurants so that we can do email scanning. The common question is, well, why is this any different from Vivino, Wine Searcher, Delectable, these various apps? I guess the closest thing is Wine Searcher. We slightly built this around some feedback that people had where they wanted a better Wine Searcher. There was elements in it that people didn't find particularly useful. It carries quite a lot of ghost inventory. As a platform, I think it's done extraordinary work, but it's perhaps a little bit dated in some ways now. I'm going to just add in an extra person. So we wanted to build it around that. With Vivino, the big distinction, as you'll see as we go through, Vivino is, if you like, the Amazon of wine sales, because they do the selling. You sort of sell through them, but they're the vendor for an awful lot of what runs through them. In the UK, actually, Amazon's a really big platform for selling wine. And it's quite a dangerous platform for selling wine, because as you can imagine, they're gathering enormous amounts of data. They're keeping it to themselves. They're using that to go and create competitor products. And they are beginning to encroach on the territory of people who used to sell through Amazon. I'm sure that's not what Hein is wanting to do, but there's an element where the data and the relationship belongs to them. Doesn't belong to you. It doesn't belong to you as if you're a retailer, or if you're a wine producer, or indeed if you're an importer or a distributor. So you can sell lots of products, but you don't necessarily know to whom. You don't get to control your brand and where your pricing sits. And you don't get to go back to them later on and say, I'd love to go and sell you something else. So the way we like to think of it, and I should point out, Vivino is a client. They're going to sell through Picks. We see ourselves as complementary rather than competitive in that sense. So what we see ourselves as, and I'll show you a feature later on which perhaps helps with this. Picks is closer to a Google of wine. It is entirely free to list on. It is entirely free to use, because when somebody clicks on a listing of your wine, they go straight through to either a selection of retailers or to you as a retailer to go and complete the transaction without us taking any fees or any charges. Then it's an entirely, people come straight through us and it doesn't cost anything. And as we'll see a bit later on, the way we make money is exactly the same way that Google does. We'll be launching a keyword and context bidding platform a bit later on, probably into next year. Just now, I'll show you a couple of other bits as we run through it. So it sits on those three core areas. We know that each one of those is a slightly different modality. We know that people who buy online on the whole are looking for delivery, and they're often quite involved wine buyers. They buy quite expensively. In retail, when people are scanning, that tends to be a slightly more mass market buyer. So we're looking at a different sort of modality. You've got less screen real estate there. In restaurants, we're doing quite a bit of interesting work around what is it that people are looking to get in restaurants. Where can we go and give people confidence to buy something that's really interesting as part of their meal? So it doesn't cost you anything to list on it. We don't take a cut. I like to come back to this again and again. They come to your site or to your retailer's site to go and buy. So DTC is important to us. Really looking for the ability to go and elevate and give prominence to DTC platforms to go and sell directly, DTC vendors, but also through 3-tier. And it integrates directly and completely with your e-commerce platform. We are not, certainly in the short term, looking to go and start crawling websites, and I suspect not even in the long term. What we want to be able to do is and this is something that's happened quite recently, is have API feeds and direct feeds that takes information a bit like in Instacart, so that we're showing what you have, how you describe it, so that certainly if you're a producer or a brand owner, you can control that messaging around your wine. We've got a user interface where people can go and actually amend their own tasting notes and update information. And as retailers, you get to go and even give us down to the level of what your inventory is. And in fact, we love that when people can go and give us that sort of content. So we can then do things like last 5 bottles available with you. In time, we'll have this sponsored product listings. So the idea is that people will be able to go and buy keywords. And if you are a producer, sometimes people will say, well, what does that mean? Do I buy the Napa Valley? No, because it'd be horrendously expensive with keyword bidding, because effectively you get it if you bid more than everybody else. But actually quite a good way is you might go and buy the keywords of your 2 key competitors, so that you show up in searches for your key competitor wines. You might be able to, we're planning that we're doing this so it's geolocated. You might say, I just want to go and bid on keywords for people around me. And we're going to give people insights. We know that certain keywords probably don't get much bidding on them. Things like great wines for Thanksgiving. And that's probably now caught up, but there are a whole series of less well-known keywords. Ultimately, the inventory of keywords is infinite, because you've got sentence strings and all sorts. Great wines near me to go with lamb kebabs. That's not going to cost you very much money. You can go and sell potentially a range of wines that go with those wines, with those that sort of food, and you can catch a local audience. This is the team behind it. Just before we show you a couple of other bits, led by Paul Mabry up on the top left-hand side. The very long career in wine tech. He's been saying that this platform's on its way for a very long time. He's absolutely delighted that this platform is now on its way because he's been wanting it. He's led by a CFO, COO, Michael, who curiously actually is Glaswegian. He and I were at university together, although we didn't know it many, many years ago. He's very much come from the world of startups and so on in Silicon Valley. And our CTO, Matt, is doing a thing I cannot explain, particularly along with Leslie Yake. The two of them are creating what I would know is a wholly better, more complex graph database that is able to go and surface more qualities. It's able to go and interrogate search in a way we've never been able to do before in the world of wine. And we're certainly creating a unique database of the wines, initially in the United States and the United Kingdom, our two launch markets, and subsequently going around the world. I'm there on our trade side, so I am responsible. It's a small job. I'm in charge of trying to look after every single person who makes, trades or sells wine somewhere in the world. So I will be building a team to help me over the course of the time. At the moment, it's just about 3 or 4 of us. On the right-hand side, a couple of names you may recognize. Erica Ducey, who's the commissioning editor, managing editor at VinePair and 750 Daily, and Felicity Carter, who European, based in Germany, or just Australian, based in Germany. She edited Meininger's Wine Business International. A really important part of the platform is our content. So as well as being a great state-of-the-art search engine, we're also having a rich, constantly updated content platform, publication site, along with interesting emails that are going out to subscribers and so on. And we've got a calendar there. And now I can tell you about it, but I can't tell you too much. We have a separation of sort of church and state. I wrote it actually based on the New York Times. So imagine it is a bit like that. They're editorial, I'm commercial. But when if your wine is listed in that, it's shoppable. So the article may be 8 great wines to have for Thanksgiving. The wine link will then link straight the way through to those retailers that you can go and buy that wine from. We sit separate from that, but it's a great thing for us to be able to have to say, well, actually, if your wine does show up in there, it's brilliant because it just gets sold straight through. People will click from the article directly through to where they can go and buy it, bringing them closer and bringing editorial closer, arguably ever, than before to the point of purchase. And it serves a couple of purposes, really. One is it gives people a reason to come back. It's an engaging part of our platform. It helps our SEO so that we're sitting in broader search. But the other part of it is that it helps us answer customer problems that a computer can't. Great claims are made for artificial intelligence. We know enough about AI to know that we've got to be realistic. It's really bad at recommending 5 great wines that are a gift for my boss. I spend quite a lot of time on a site, Answer the Public. You won't believe how many people search for great gifts for my boss. And here we're able to give human answers, and we're looking all the time. Yes, we have a big AI platform. I'm an old school wine merchant. I started out in the early 90s in a little rural wine merchant in the north of England, and then ended up working for Berry Brothers and Rudd in London, selling wine to the Queen, who was literally one of my customers. I'm wanting to recreate the very human experience of people going and buying wine from people. And ultimately, what's what we do? We bring people together. We say, actually, go and talk to that producer, talk to that man, connect those people up. On the way, I don't want people to feel it's being done by an artificial intelligence search engine. I want them to feel like it's a person who's handing them over. And that's we can do through our content, and we can also do it through some of the things we're doing in our platform. Now, we've welcomed thousands of wine suppliers already. There's a couple of names of some people you may recognize there. Some of them are of some size. Actually, some are tiny. Some of the retailers are tiny. Bin2 in Padstow was the first UK retailer we had. They service a tiny little market. I'm delighted to say they've also won Best Wine Retailer in the UK twice. It's where David Cameron goes surfing. It's what they go and do. In fact, I'll just sort of pop up just a bit. At the moment, just to give you a sense, it's about more than 3,000 companies of different sorts of integrated wine companies have said they would like to join the platform. We have, within the platform today, now bear in mind, we've done no press or outreach. You are among the very first people we're really talking to about this in a sort of broader kind of a way, and we're doing quite a lot of this kind of chat, hopefully over the next few weeks. We have somewhere between 250 and 3,000 wines that are sitting within our search, within our database. Now those are the wines where we have a sort of central record of that wine. Attached to those wines in different vintages, we have somewhere between 12 and 15 million offers from retailers linking back to those wines. So if you're a wine producer, you'll tend to be very interested in this core database of wines. How can I go and put better tasting notes in, own the truth, if you like, of that listing? If you're a wine retailer, you're very interested in all the bits around the edges saying, yeah, I sell that, I've got this price on that wine, I have 4 cases of it, something like that ingest. So there's quite a big combat. I can see there's a couple of questions. I'll just very quickly have a quick look to see if I can. So yes, thank you very much indeed, Tara, for going and putting that on. Jeff, you say, what's the plan to drive users and stand apart amidst all the apps, not just wine apps that exist today? Brilliant question. As it's absolutely superb. I'll keep on this just for the moment. Various ways. We're doing a lot of work on some very clever SEO so that searches for particular wines that sit in Google will be reflected within Google listings. There will be a PIX listing there. There is a major work around press and raising the profile. Certainly, within the wine show, how many people we talked to? I don't know, 80 million, something like that. One of the reasons I joined is not just because I know lots about wine, but it was partly because I have something of a reach to be able to go and talk to a sort of broader global audience through Erica and through Felicity. So we've tried to avoid too much press, if I'm honest. We ended up in the Washington Post and the New York Times, which doesn't sound like somebody who's trying to avoid too much press. But we didn't particularly want it, but they sort of said that we want to write to you. And the third part is clever, really. We're talking to a lot of people like wine critics. I'm slightly careful to kind of say who. Many wine critics go and say, you can buy this wine here, and then embedding a link, sometimes to Wine Searcher. There's a lot of that. Finding clever ways. I was just talking to a wine competition yesterday, and they have, I can't remember how many thousand wines that sit on that competition. We're doing a bit of backwards and forwards, sort of scratching each other's backs, so that all of their wine listings will have the link through will be to PIX. So there'll be a PIX link that will then tell their users where they can go and get those wines. So those bits where you embed yourself into somebody else's platform to go and draw people through, particularly engaged wine consumers, is pretty big for us. We're looking at a few quite exciting ways of driving traffic in that sort of space. So if you imagine those three, SEO is one big plank, lots and lots of press, and working with partners like the Wine Show that I've got. I write for the UK's biggest monthly magazine, which is Saga. It's for old people like me. You've got to be over 50 to subscribe. We're doing some work with them. And then the final part is where we're able to go and relate with people. One bit which we are exploring, and I'd love over time to get your view on this. Somebody came to us and they said, would they be able to market something directly to our registered users? So we already actually have a few, so they've got some folk coming through. So we get registered users coming up, and we chewed this problem over. Now I don't know exactly how it works, but one thing that we've never really got an online end cap. Flash sites, yes, we've never really created something that's sort of engaging thing. So we're looking at ways of essentially, how do we go and, yes, let's take some of your network into the PIX space along with our network to go and resolve things like added value offers. This particular person wanted to do a concert, actually. They were a winemaker who wanted to do an online concert. Can't say too much, but Kylie Minogue. So that was sort of the idea of being able to go and bring people together. Jill, just before we go, do you have any estimates on what the initial reach users will be upon launch? At the moment, we just have like beta testers, which is about 3,500 users, which isn't huge at all. We are looking, we've got some pretty bold targets in the sort of, more than 1 million monthly users is amongst our sort of targeting for soon after launch. So we're not expecting to be number one, but I'll be comfortable at number 2. So our aspiration certainly is to fairly rapidly rise to the second biggest platform. I would say something like that. I'm always happy to be Avis. We're number 2, so we try harder. Among the things that are really useful for us, one is particularly for retailers, or where there are retailers, or where you have often. I know we're talking to lots of brand, wineries and brand owners here, where you have things on a digital, data management system like Salsify, is to be able to integrate that information so that we can enrich your listings. And that's giving that sort of, it's it's sharing that sort of content, doing it through some sort of integration. And we've got great ways of doing it. In return, we don't like to just ask people to go and do it, because we know that makes the content more trustworthy. And we know that a lack of trust in online apps has been a problem in the past. We actually have set the thing up so it elevates that content, so that in free organic search, where it's well integrated and we know it's coming direct from the winery's DMS, and we know that it's got a retailer who's giving us, let's say, inventory data, those listings sit higher up. So if we're looking for general recommendations, let's say in the Russian River Valley, the Russian River Valley producers, where we know we've got really great rich content and we know it's trustworthy and we can see that it's coming straight from the producer, right, we'll sit those further up. Where we have individual retailers, or we know how many bottles they've got in stock, we know it's not a ghost listing, which is a problem sometimes, certainly in Europe on Wine Searcher. Let's go and elevate that to the top. If people want to search for other things, they can go through the listing. So we're not going to hide anything, but we're going to give prominence where we know that it's a richer scene, if you like. Just quick sort of timeline, I'll show you some early shots of what it's going to look like. For the next 4 weeks or so, we're ingesting people's data. So every day we bring more data into the system, find a new groups, right, let's do WooCommerce today, let's do Shopify sort of tomorrow. And each time we just see how that integrates. It's kind of complicated. I have nothing to do with this. And in about, it's actually it's the first week of June, we're launching our content publication, both in email and as a customer facing. And we use that to learn, because you can put information out and you can A/B test it and you can see what people engage with. And actually that gives us information we can then go and use within the platform itself. So that ability to see where things work. I'll give you a weird example, but we know, for instance, that people who use Internet Explorer when they're searching for wine online are less adventurous drinkers than people who use Firefox. That's actually really useful information if you're launching an Assyrtiko in California. Firefox users are the ones who are more likely to go for that. And that's the sort of insight that we're looking to go and get. And actually it's useful because if you're a more adventurous drinker, I'd much rather see a Assyrtiko than a big brand Sauvignon Blanc. That's what I'd quite like to see, so we can find that out. And as we get that market fit over the next 8 to 12 weeks, then we get to the point in about 12 weeks, we think. So 12 weeks time for a minimum viable product launch out to the general public and see how that goes. So that was me. I'm going to sort of stop sharing there. If I could, I'm just going to very quickly show you roughly what a search page looks like, just to sort of explain something. So here, the person has searched for a wine. Now, there are various pages. I won't take you necessarily through all of them, but there are 4 features that I'd just kind of like to, well, 5 really. So from the top right-hand box here, I'm looking for, and because of the way we're doing this, you don't have to be looking for a wine. I'm looking for a gift. I'm looking for something that goes with chicken. I'm looking for a Merlot. I'm looking for wines in the Napa Valley. We did a thing the other day. We've got a little bit. I'm looking for something that tastes of blackcurrants, and it will just show you up lots and lots of wines that taste of blackcurrants. So we're keeping that very open. And as the machine learns better and better, it will come up with some interesting parts. Some of those answers will not be from the machine. Some of them will be from wine experts. We're working closely with sommeliers and with the Napa Valley Wine Academy to help us teach the engine relevant answers. So for the moment, if you go and get it to search for Chardonnay, or when we first did it, it'd show you lots of sparkling wine. But I kind of know as a human, people searching for Chardonnay want still Chardonnay. if they want sparkling, they'll ask for sparkling. So we're teaching it all the time to come up with those. They're also helping us with these. These will not be the final terms, but we've got things up here. I'm just looking for something popular, collectible, trendy, classic. We're actually kicking around what those should be, and we will test them to see what works. We know, certainly from some research in the UK, the most common drinking motivation in the UK is people are tired. I'm not surprised. I've got a 3-year-old out there who's not very well. I'm quite tired. I could do with a glass of wine. But beyond that, actually, people want to self-treat. Just show me something special. Actually, I'm kind of happy to pay a bit more. Just show me something special. Show me something I can share with friends. Something that I can trust to share with friends. We get interesting groups where people say, I'm different. Show me something that's a little bit different. And we're going to reflect that and get our experts to help us, if you like, curate selections. And over time, the machine will learn those are kind of different, so we can populate those up. So those are just the first sort of couple of features. Down here, we've got, this is what you searched for. So when somebody searched, in this case, for Duckhill Merlot, that's the wine you searched for. Here is an authoritative note from the winery that tells you about that. And this belongs, if you like, to the wine producer. We give the wine producer the ability to speak their truth, if I'm to quote Prince Harry. Down here, we say, this is where you can get it. And I won't sort of highlight it so you can go and have a look, but I'm actually telling you a bit about it. Not just cheapest. Lots of people said they hated doom scrolling for wine. Oh, it's cheap, it's cheap, it's cheap. Because half the time it wasn't that cheap at all. It was just that somebody had got a ghost listing and they were pretending they had it, or it was in a pipette somewhere, or it was an old listing. So what we say to people is, you can buy it from the producer. Yeah, it's expensive. You could get on their list. That's kind of helpful. Some people love to buy from producers. You can buy it from somebody who's cheap, in this case, wine.com, but it's going to take you a few days and it'll cost you $12 to get it delivered. Actually, 1.1 miles away, there's a dude who's selling it. Now, it's a little bit more expensive, but you can get it in 20 minutes because you can nip round there in your lunch break and just go and pick the thing up. Or actually, Astor Wines will deliver it to you today. It's going to cost you, what is this, $10. But yeah, it's great. Just have it delivered to my office because I'm going to a party and I just want to go and be able to take it a bit later on. We will never charge for those listings. We may actually change what the categories are, but we're never charging for those listings at all. We'll only be taking charge listings a little bit lower down where we have our sponsored listings. The final bit, we are a wine discovery platform. We're wine lovers. We like it. We want to be able to go and share the love of wine with people. And part of wine, it's a journey. You know, yeah, I have wines. I've got one here. I tell you what, I really love Vigna Tondonia from Lopez de Heredia. I think it's great wine. Sometimes I want to try something different though. I've only got that because my in-laws are coming and I want to share it with them. But you know, I quite like to share different wines with people. Well, on the right-hand side, and these are terrible suggestions, but our students have got a task at the moment where we're saying to them, okay, somebody searched for this Merlot. Can you show me something that's kind of like that, but maybe a bit more expensive, like that, maybe a bit cheaper, like that, but sort of different, maybe from a different country, or from the same place, but from a slightly different grape variety. Can you show us where these adventurous things are? Again, the machine will learn over time how to do those recommendations, but they're ultimately quite human recommendations. And so it's important to have real people, and we're using here the ability to effectively scale up an extra pair of hands in the retailer who can then go and say, let me show you this. I've actually got quite an interesting bottle of wine that I'd love to go and show you. It's a bit different, but you might like this. So if you like Chardonnay, actually you might quite like dry ferment from Hungary. It's brilliant wine for Chardonnay lovers. If you like a cross between Chardonnay and Riesling, which is I think what ferment actually is, you're going to enjoy this. This is the space where we can say to people, actually, if you really like European Chardonnay, you've enjoyed Langhe Chardonnay, I'll just put one in the fridge, you're probably going to quite like dry ferment from Hungary. So give it a whirl and we'll sit those on that side of the sheet. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to come out of the stop share and slightly throw the floor open. I've done too much talking. You've had enough of my droning English voice, I suspect, nasal tones. I'd love to hear what people thought. If there's anybody, I don't know, Terry, if you've got a view on what you've seen so far, don't be like a British pantomime and say it's rubbish. That would be very disheartening for me. What did you think, Terry? Oh, you need to unmute yourself. I will get you to unmute.
Yeah.
There we go.
A family in England, so in Stratford. So what a small world. But we don't sell our wine, much outside the US. So how does that restrict us?
Not at all, because certainly in the initial part of it's going to be quite good because we're only going to be in the US and we'll do it in the UK. We're going to be able to geolocate that platform. So UK users, where there are wines that aren't shipped outside of the US, it's actually dead straightforward to say, well, we only ship inside the US. So we only want to show up in US searches. And indeed, I've learned a lot about the 3-tier system, which I thought was mad until I compared it with the British system, which is, I have to say, a free-for-all that's even madder. It's actually not a problem when you know that's because already all those platforms do it, being able to say, okay, well, actually, where are you as a user? Because we can only go and ship to you. Is it right? I'm trying to think, isn't there a challenge between Massachusetts and California is one of those sort of problematic trades? California's still lots of places, but I know Massachusetts is one of the ones it can't go to. So yeah, absolutely. Hopefully, tell me, are you primarily DTC? What's your?
We're about 50% DTC. And then, we have a huge Northern California following, which is really interesting. We have an odd makeup. And then we're in other states, but our wholesale is lower. So, and other
One
states.
thing you may find useful, Pix as a business grew out of Emmetry. Emmetry was a software, as an analytics platform. Paul Maybury likes to make the point that we were Google Analytics, we just had no Google. And so he was ingesting lots of data from VIP and from wineries' own systems, and then being able to use that to go and create a data dashboard so that somebody like you would know, right, well, actually, that's where my audience comes from. These are the people. And then use that to be quite predictive. So one of the things that was very useful was I remember when I first learned about it, was the Dirtsing point. Predicting at what point people in wine clubs are likely to drop out of wine clubs and the sort of engagement that would bring them back in. And it's very effective at saying these 15 people, their level of engagement is such that we think they're probably going to drop out, and it had a very strong predictive ability. Now, this sort of a thing is going to bring them back in so that you maintain that flow. You have a cluster of customers who are in Houston, Texas, and actually it turns out they're only buying this sort of range of wines, but if we go and do this kind of promotion, we could get them to buy a slightly broader range, or we could go and do this to activate that market. We're giving that away for free. So as a winery, you get that for free, completely free. And I think it was selling for a lot of money. It was like $30,000. Commerce 7 was very easy because that was, I don't know what platform you're on. Don't worry about it. But I know Shopify, it's already embedded with them, WooCommerce, Commerce 7, Bev Media. So it's already going to integrate with those platforms straight away and start drawing in that data. So you can have that for free. And hopefully that will be a useful way of being able to say, well, actually, drawing on my own data, because it'll still work with all your own, winery, plus what I'm getting from the sort of broader market level analytics from Pix. So I can then overlay that. Actually, I know I've got to really look after this Northern California audience and so on. And certainly from the UK, I was amazed at how people in Northern California must drink a lot, because lots of Northern California wines sell a lot of wine to Northern California people. So good for you. Amazing.
We do, Joe. That's true. We drink a lot of wine here in Northern California.
Yeah.
Joe, in terms of the promotional potential tools, let's say there's a winery that is introducing a new wine, or maybe they want to make a big splash with a new vintage. What are some of the opportunities you see in terms of gaining visibility on Pix?
Perfect. Now, there are three things in a way. that we can go and do. One is I'm always immensely happy to go and just put people in touch with that editorial team. I don't know, we genuinely keep that sort of separate, but where there are interesting stories or where people can integrate, they want to know what's happening in the world of wine, to integrate that into interesting stories, of genuine editorial merit. So I always try to get people in touch and say, look, just have a relationship with Erica and with Felicity and with their team to go and see because they're looking for interesting stories all the time. Then over time, of course, we'll go and have our keyword bidding. And one of those useful parts, when people talk about keywords, it's awfully dry. It's kind of, oh, just go and buy this, go and buy that. I'm kind of a marketer at heart. And I end up thinking, well, what's the thing you want to achieve? Actually, keyword bidding is really useful, not to just blanket put yourself out there. It's not like, and that's why I don't like banners that just kind of, I'm here, you sort of bug people. And actually, keywords, the point is you sort of say, I've got a thing here. Now, as a producer, I've got a brand new wine. Now, I know it competes in this space for these sorts of people, or hopefully it'll actually help people narrow that down. Who's my target? How am I positioning this as a group? We've already done some segmentation for you, so we can actually say, yeah, well, actually, we can talk to those segments directly. So we know these people engage with that sort of a wine already. They've expressed an interest in that kind of thing. And actually, this is what works for them. They are really interested in this kind of a brief that go and we can go and put that out. So then you can buy keywords. You're not selling to the United States. You're selling to a set number down to the zip code in Northern California of people who fit that particular brief. For retailers, it's really useful for shifting things like at-risk inventory. I've got loads of stock. How do I go and move this? Why don't we know lots of people in your local area are going and making searches for wines that go with pasta dishes. It's Montepulciano de Bruzzo. Let's go and buy some, do some keyword bidding around those kind of terms. So that's sort of one way. And then the third is going to be through our trade newsletters. So we are going to be having trade letters going out to people. So as well as our sort of editorial, we'll be putting out, give me time, we've got lots of bits, but we are wanting to go and have that sort of thing of being able to say, here are some really exciting offers, especially where it's added value. This is a brand new wine. These guys are doing a Zoom tasting, for free with everybody buys a case. Here's an ability, go and try this wine, and this winery is opening up to the public this summer, and you can go and visit them. It's that sort of thing. Hopefully that answers it. I can see Jeff's got his hand up. Jeff, unmute yourself and tell us what you're after.
Thanks, Joe. So I was looking at your screenshot, and it was interesting that you had both the producer as well as retailers that were showing their prices on it, which obviously is a very similar functionality to Wine Searcher. I was checking to see, do producers have the option do they have any say into what is listed for their particular products?
If they are the route to market, then yes.
Yep.
If a retailer is a route to market, it's what the retailer does with it. And I know we sort of talked about this because somebody was telling me about this sort of complication of why producers are always much more expensive than retailers.
Right.
I can't confess to knowing that I understood what he was telling me about it. He said, no, they'll always be more expensive. Because we're ingesting directly from retailers' feeds, in the end, it's the feed that comes out of that retailer. One thing we're working hard on, and we don't have all the answers, but we'll get better at it, is that we want to be able to give clarity about actually what that price really means. Because is that including delivery? Have we included all state taxes and national taxes, all those sort of bits and pieces? So we're just wanting to be able to give as clear a picture as possible. One thing, if I'm totally honest, I think we can, or I don't know if we necessarily would want to do, is to say, we have agreed with the producer that this is the RRP that the wine is going to go out at, irrespective of what that route to market is. If people are depressing the price unnaturally, and we have had this, where people are, in the UK, we've had problems with Wine Search where people have given a price they're not actually prepared to sustain. And then effectively they bait and switch people and say, oh, well, I don't have it at that price anymore. You've got to go and buy it at £5 cheaper. We are actually going to just take those out of the system. We are policing the market in that way.
When it comes to, I know you were mentioning RRP, does the PIX platform, would this tie in any way to some of those other industry trade sites like the drinks business or the spirits business. You know, they have those like new product sections. So and maybe that's something that you guys are thinking about. I'm just kind of curious on that editorial front, maybe how that linkage to buy would occur.
Completely. So one, you know, and I think this will be one of those bits of where can we have those discussions? We've already had a few. So actually the drinks business is quite nice because I know Patrick Schmidt quite well, and you know all the sort of UK sites, Harper's, and I used to write for Harper's quite a bit. Those are nice ones because yes, we, you know, what we want to be able to do is to go and have that thing of swapping as much as possible. It's that thing of swapping users, if you like, across both ways, and being able to say, here is an authoritative site of people being able to go get it, and you can trust it because we are actually kind of policing the market. And yes, when you're going and doing a launch, then we'll go and have it run through. So certainly that's an area. I mean, I've got to tell you, at the moment we sort of work insanely bonkers hours. It's even worse if you're in Stockholm because you have to work till 1 o'clock in the morning every day. But we're really driving that sense of let's just get this thing out there. But you're absolutely right. That ability to then say, well, where can we build those relationships? And I think, you know, right from the beginning, when Paul asked me to join, what I quite liked about it, it was terribly human. It's just a lot of people. And that sense of being able to say, well, let's look at where we can be creative. You know, one thing we've talked about is, you know, we're probably building the single biggest database in the world of wine. We are not, certainly in terms of the core information, looking at going and building some massive moat around that. The wine world actually needs pretty easy access to a broad database of the world's wines. We talk sometimes about that idea of sort of balkanization of wine data, and you get sort of balkanization of wine stories. Somebody gets it and says, no, I'm going to keep that. I'm going to keep that. Actually, the wine world and you're all much better served, actually, if lots of people get it. And if there's then an interlinking between where the story sits, how you go and buy the wine, how you then connect through to who the importer is and the representative and the agent and, you know, the retailer and so on. So yeah, that's one of those parts. And also that's a brilliant idea, because I'm just going to make a note later and say to Paul, let's put this down in August to go and have conversations with people about going and doing just that. I'm certainly been talking to timatkin.com, Jancis,
yeah.
You know,
Jamie Good.
Good old Jamie Good. Jamie and I go back an awful long way. He liked an article I wrote anonymously this morning. So if you go on Twitter, Fake Booze is a sort of satirical site, and nobody knows it's me, but I'll tell you, there's a piece, a naughty piece, it's not that naughty, about wine competitions this morning. So Jamie Good just liked it. So yeah, but you know, guys like Jamie have an amazing audience, really engaged, you know, consumers, and for him, because for him, he can use us, and Tim Atkin was talking about this the other day, because we're not selling it, you are, the retailer is. We are simply a meta layer that connects the wine lover and the wine seller, however they are. You know, we've got no skin in the game. We don't mind. It's a free listing. We just fill your boots. Go and, you know, and so Tim sort of said, yeah, that's great, because with some of the other sites, you know, am I going to be piling people towards sponsored listings? You know, Vivino certainly has that, because ultimately it's Vivino. And, you know, I have lots of time for Vivino. You know, you won't mind find me sort of knocking people. What do we have here? Another question. Are you planning on having user reviews? Oh, Tara, you are. Very good question. And what other features? Favorites lists, want to try these user photos. You know what? It's all up for grabs. We have a view. I'm sort of a behavioral scientist. I'm speaking actually at a conference in June. I think it's June the 11th, called Nudge Stock, about the behavioral science of wine. Where I'm arguing that if you can only really use palette matching apps if you're like Ayn Rand, because you have to not care what anybody else thinks about what the wine tastes like, as long as you're happy. Always quite like to get a Fountainhead reference in somewhere. We don't know what the right answer is. Now, the right answer is the one that connects wine lovers and wine users the best. Interestingly, Netflix found that they got much better usability and people liked it much more when they didn't have user reviews. What they found was really useful was to have kind of 3-word reviews. And we started playing a little bit with what would happen if we had 3-word reviews, and we can sort of test them, but, you know, something that it tastes of, something like a texture note, We often know people by their texture actually much more than by particular aromatic character. And something gives a sense of what you do with this. This is a great wine to show friends. This is a brilliant wine to have dinner with. This goes really well with lamb. This is kind of fun party wine. Barbecues, collectible, that sort of thing. For Netflix, actually, that was a much more useful sort of metric for them than user reviews. Undoubtedly, a later iteration will be kind of user sites. So when people become registered users, the ability to go and say, these were my favorite wines, this is what I kind of love, here's a bit of a community. We don't want to step too much, that's kind of seller tracker territory. They do it really well when they sort of collect it. We also know there's a relatively poor engagement in the overall. So yes, some people go and do it, but actually the mass engagement in that sort of that platform. I mean, I'm a sort of registered user. I think I've done like 5 tasting notes on Vivino. Heini Zachariasen gave me such a hard time because he said I should be a super user. So I'm in terrible trouble with Heini for not having more Vivino users. Photographs, very much so, because the engine gets much better at recognizing pictures the more pictures that go in. So we have to find, if you like, gamified ways of people going and shoving more photos into the system, because then it learns them better. So hopefully that answers the question, Tara. So you're nodding. That's sort of useful.
Hey, Joe, could you basically summarize for us, how does a winery now participate in PICS from the standpoint of providing data into the platform itself? Is it directly from the winery? Is it through, Commerce 7 or wherever their e-commerce platform is? Can you sort of summarize the sort of because we've got wineries from California and from Chile on the line and so forth, and in the East Coast, so that would be helpful.
Hola to everybody from Chile. I'm a great lover of the wines of Chile, and indeed the East Coast. So the number one thing at the moment is get in touch with me. Jeremy will put you in touch. Drop me a line. If you are on Commerce 7, actually it's really easy because it's just flipping a switch, I think. And I think the same is true of Bev Media and a couple of other platforms. The key piece of information, we've tried to make it as easy as possible, is if you simply say to us, I sit my data in this environment. I know often if you're selling both in 3-tier and DTC, the DTC will have an e-commerce platform that may well be something like, let's say WooCommerce, or it might be Shopify. If you are then selling through 3-tier, the information, and it might be a different range of wines, may sit in something like Salsify. But we can draw information from both those places. And so it's useful just to say, well, actually, I've got everything on Salsify, but I also sell some through DTC. That's great, because we can actually draw from both those places and we can work out what goes where, and we'll line it up. We're not going to put stuff up without telling you. So don't worry. Our closed beta is closed. It's 2,500, 3,000 people. And we're going to do that in increments. So like 500 people, 1,000, 2,000. So we'll be gradually growing that. And there'll be opportunities for people to come in and say, that doesn't look quite right, or that looks amazing, or can I go in and change that? And one thing that we're going to be doing is where we draw in the 2 big challenges for us are tasting notes and photographs. Those are the things that we really want, having to work hard at, largely because the tasting notes, it has to be third person in a way. So this wine is X, this wine does such and such. And most people say, well, our wine is such, and we love walking through the vineyard. And that just reads really badly on the page. So we will be sort of working with people to go and find ways of going and creating third-party tasting notes. Sometimes it's easy, actually. People have them because they've created them in Salsify. But actually, the main thing at the moment is drop a line to me. I've got a brilliant team of people, and I can go and farm out that sort of info to folk. You are at the start of a very interesting journey. I'm hoping that when when this is huge and we've got 180 million wines and we're across the world, you'll sort of say, crikey, that was kind of weird, because he was talking to me from a flat in Stockholm and just said, just email me. Because you're at the beginning, you can always just email me. That's I'll be delighted to go and hear from you. But hopefully that answers it. And we'll get you in the queue. I go and load up the data, or my team gets the data loaded up, and we kick off from there.